I confused the Mid-Atlantic region as well. When I signed up for this,
We actually do have a couple of Women's League members who've been members of every region, and
Oh, that's so funny.
so Nancy's one of them, you know. So,
Rabbi,
okay.
good morning.
Rabbi, I think it's getting close to 12. We're alive on Facebook?
I'm streaming.
Terrific.
And I think Audrey was going to say something.
Yes,
Yeah.
Audrey. Audrey couldn't get a word in edgewise, which is really unusual for Audrey. Go ahead, Audrey. Of watching you laugh.
Of the laugh.
Yes, Audrey.
Morning, Rabbi.
Good morning. Did you want to say something, Audrey? We now gave you the floor.
I loved yesterday's program. It was wonderful.
Yes.
We'll talk about it.
We'll
Okay.
talk a little.
It is 12. I am going to mute everybody. Poor Mary's never going to come back.
Wonderful.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. It's wonderful to be together. I am sorry for those of you that live where there's major snow and your lives will be disturbed this week. I saw in the news that the snowstorm coming across the country is going to affect 110 million people. And that's just in the United States. I don't know what it's going to do in Canada, although Ruth said that they haven't had snow yet. So I think it's coming. I think you're going to get your share. It's nice to be with you. Many of us yesterday attended the Pacific Southwest Day of Study, which was absolutely fabulous, incredible. There were about 175 of us on, and I think every region was represented. It was a wonderful day. We want to thank our own Rabbi Ellen, who was the moderator. And I don't know if Roberta's on, but Roberta was chair of the program as Region Torah Fund Vice President. She did a wonderful job planning it. Our own Karen Bellina was the tech person. It was a difficult day for Karen. So thank you, Karen, for making everything work. If you're here, you're listening. It was just a really nice opportunity for us to understand all about Torah Fund and the seminaries that we support and to get a firsthand look. So it was a great program and I'm glad many of you got on and it was nice to see you. So I'm just going to go right to the rabbi.
Thank you. Good to see everybody. And the program is actually already, I believe, on our website on the members only part so that you can watch the recording of the program from yesterday. It was really fantastic. And Susan probably has similar weather to what I have because she only lives a couple of miles from me. It is disgusting out. I'm very glad I don't have to go anywhere. One child has a real snow day, which is shocking. The other two are learning remotely. So I was very happy that the internet is working since everyone in the community is using the internet today, since everyone's child is pretty much home. But that's okay. And we are together studying, so which is really wonderful to be together. And we're going to start with Karen Weiner singing Mishaberach for us. And Karen, please do pause between paragraphs so we can say the name of our loved ones individually.
Mishaberach Avotenu Mikor habracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misher Berach Imotenu Mikor habracha Le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Thank you. Yasher kochech to you. Always
Yeah.
beautiful listening to you sing. Psalm 48 today, Susan will be reading in memory of her mother, Annette Korn, who's your Recitation today.
Thank you, Rabbi. A song, a psalm of the sons of Korah. Great is Adonai, and highly praised in the city of our God, God's holy mountain. Splendid, sublime, on the north is Mount Zion, joy of all the earth, city of the great sovereign. God is, I can't read it. God is known in her citadels as a refuge. The rulers conspired in advance, but when they saw her, they were astounded. Panic stunned them. They fled in fright. Seized with trembling like a woman in labor, shattered like a fleet wrecked by an east wind. What we once heard, we now have witnessed in the city of Adonai Svaot, in the city of our God. May God preserve it forever. Selah. In your temple, God, we meditate upon your kindness. Your glory, like your name, reaches the ends of the earth. Your right hand is filled with beneficence. Let the mountain of Zion be glad. Let the cities of Judah rejoice because of your judgments. Walk all about Zion, encircle her, count her towers, review her ramparts, scan her citadels, then tell her story to later generations. Tell of our God who will guide us forever.
Thank you. Yasher koach to you.
Thank you.
So today we're learning Pirkei Avot 3:10, which really teaches a great lesson to everyone, no matter how old you are. And it's one of these teachings that truly transformed my thinking about it as I was reading and preparing. So we learned from Rabbi Dostai bar Rabbi Yanai, who liked to say in the name of Rabbi Meir. So you always quote who you're teaching from. All those who forget even a single word of their learning are considered by Scripture in the same category as those found guilty of capital offenses. As it is said, take care and exert all due diligence, lest you forget the things that your eyes have seen. In Deuteronomy 4, chapter 4, verse 9. Perhaps this applies even to those whose studies overwhelm them. Thus does Scripture continue, lest your lessons be eliminated from your heart all the days of your life. Same place in Deuteronomy. Thus we learn that one should not be considered in the same category as those found guilty of capital offenses, unless one sits down expressly to eliminate them from one's heart. So when I was first preparing this, I was thinking there's so many people that we know personally who have memory issues. This was like so difficult for me to be reading. I'm like, unfortunately, when you forget things and you have memory issues, it's not in your control all the time if it's a neurologic disease. So how can you say that it's as if you're guilty of a capital offense? They don't have control over the fact. They were dealt the hand of getting dementia or Alzheimer's or some kind of memory loss. So it was really very upsetting to me, I have to tell you. When I teach and prepare, I take it very personally and like think about, who does this speak to? How does this relate to my life? And I was getting really upset reading about this. I'm like, did they know that people can't always control their memory? You could try as much as you can, but we know that people have memory issues. It was really upsetting to me. And then as I read it more, especially the end, I realized that they're not talking about people who unconsciously can't keep their memories inside. If you ever dealt with someone who has a memory issue, it's really sad to see it because they don't realize that they have the memory issue necessarily. And if they do, it pains them as much as it pains us to hear the same thing over and over again at times. You have to have a caring heart. This mission is teaching us about one who intentionally forgets. And that's where it's a crime in saying here. When you intentionally forget what you're learning, and how does that happen? If you don't review what you're learning. You don't do the chazara, the repetition, and the review and the studying over and over again. So I have to tell you, if I had to explain this Pirkei Avot and I was in 5 minutes or less, that was it. Now I'll delve into it greater. But really, it teaches us, one, to realize that how important that repetition is. And I was thinking about this, that's why it's really important, and it can teach you for all ages. I have a friend whose daughter is a year old, and she sends me pictures every day of her. It's really lovely. And just to see how this little girl is learning how to do things, and they're doing it by repetition, even the same foods that she has every couple of days. So she learns how to eat certain foods. You learn by repeating it. What do we say for any of us who have ever taught Hebrew school? That the kids might know how to read great in May and June, and then when they haven't read a word of Hebrew all summer and they come back in September without that chazara, without the repetition, they forget a lot. That's for all of us. If you don't have a skill and you don't keep repeating it, you lose that skill. So this is really teaching us that Torah is the same way, and studying it is the same way, that we need repetition to really enforce and embed what we learn into our lives. So who are we learning from today? Rabbi Dostai Bar Yanai was an older contemporary of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, and he was actually a teacher of Yehuda HaNasi. He was a disciple of Rabbi Meir, so he's quoting his teacher in this teaching. He lived in the second half of the 2nd century, and his sayings are often reflect sharp wit. So there's a little bit of comedy, you might say, rabbinic comedy, that type of wit. He stresses the importance of careful retention of Torah, particularly important in the transmission of oral tradition. So remember, they didn't have printed books back then, so you really had to repeat it and learn it and review it, because that's how it was transmitted to each person. If you didn't keep repeating it, then you wouldn't know it, because you wouldn't be able to open a book. That's not what they had. He was truly one of the leading sages in his time. He was a student of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Elisha ben Abahu, and he was one of the most frequently quoted rabbis in the Talmud, which I always thought was interesting, since you don't meet many kids today who are named Dostai. But he was repeated and he was quoted quite often. And he teaches us not to treat memory as a passive operation. But I don't want to say it's the memory that we can't always control. It's the learning that we need to repeat. And we need to take an active role in shaping our memories to ensure that the central tenets of our lives guide us towards action and thought. So it's not just learning, it's putting it to action and to put it into thought as well. So who was his teacher, Rabbi Meir? He lived in the 2nd century CE, and he was one of the outstanding leaders of the generation that followed the failed Bar Kokhba revolt. He was mostly concerned with halacha, and he played an important role in the development of the Mishnah, what we're studying. He was a descendant of proselytes, and his name, some say, wasn't originally Rabbi Meir, but Nahari, and he was called Rabbi Meir, which is a great thing if you ever want to name a child, because his teaching brought light to other people. He enlightened others, and that's what the name Meir means, to bring light to others. So he got this new name because he enlightened others with his teaching. And he also studied the same as, he studied with Elisha ben Abuya and also Rabbi Yishmael. But he was primarily the student of Rabbi Akiva. So people's lineage back then was extremely important, as you see. So what is it saying here? Kol hashocheach, whoever forgets. And it's not just because of a neurologic thing. It's because of your indifference, your laziness, due to negligence. You're obligated to review one's studies regularly to minimize the natural process of forgetfulness. And the Mishnah condemns one who fails to make every effort to retain what he's learned, or he or she has learned. So you really have to find your way to review. And it might be removed from your heart because you haven't reviewed it. So it really shows us how important. If one does not study Torah, one forgets it. And the longer one goes without reviewing, the more one forgets. So we really need to hone our skills. I think it's a lesson that many of us have learned already, but it's great to see that it's in the Mishnah. So if you're ever with your children or grandchildren and they're complaining about something, that they didn't do well on a test, or they didn't know something, or they can't ride the bike, practice makes perfect, right? What's that joke about? How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. And that is what this Mishnah is teaching us. It wasn't just a joke. It's from the Mishnah right here. So, but let's think about it. We all do forget. We have to realize that there's natural forgetfulness. But he's not talking about here the natural forgetfulness. It's the personal laxity, the personal laziness about it. It's like someone who, you know, it's the person's birthday, but you just forget because you never wrote it down. You never took the extra step to write down when something's going to be, to remind yourself. You know that it's Shabbos, but you don't take into consideration what to do to make that day special. That you just, some people just don't care that it's Shabbos and they just go about doing whatever they want to do. So there's one thinker that says to think is to forget. So if you're going to think about something, there's a possibility of forgetting. There's a productive thinking. It requires that you prioritize data. You might know that it's so-and-so's birthday tomorrow, but do you prioritize to do something about that knowledge? You know that Shabbos is coming, but do you prioritize to realize I should get everything prepared for that? I should figure out which service I want to zoom into this Shabbat and get the information ahead of time. So the need to review and to learn, because the more you learn, the more you grow. You stay static, you don't grow. And at every age we can grow. You need to continue to learn, to grow, to review. And through that, it builds up your nefesh, your whole soul. That is the purpose of learning. Because if you don't build up your nefesh, your soul, that's the spiritual danger. And that's one of the things he's talking about, that Torah isn't just something that you learn once. You have to put it into practice. And how do you put it into practice? By reviewing it and seeing how you can use what you learn into your life. And by learning Torah, you create a reflective life. You have the knowledge, that mind, you might learn it, but you need to put it into practice to see how it can transform and your whole soul. And memory is truly about both action and thought. That's why I'm bringing up, for example, the birthday. You might know it's someone's birthday, but now what are you going to do about it? You have to put that thought into action. And by relearning things and reviewing it, you're seeing how you can see it fresh and new. That's one of the most beautiful things. When you learn something over and over again, think about this week's Torah portion. It's going to be my weekly words of Torah. We've all heard the 10 Commandments before, but how have they seen anew now? By reviewing them again this year after reading it so many times in our lives. What does it mean differently now? That we have the one God, to honor your mother and father. What does it mean today, now, different than it did the last time you studied it? We learn in the Babylonian Talmud and Chagiga that one cannot compare a person who reviews their learning 100 times with a person who reviews their learning 101 times. And I bring him up often because this is who I learned my Mishnah from, Rabbi Dov Zlotnick of blessed memory from JTS, who would tell us that the Chazara was so important, the repetition was so important. Some of the things he taught us, I always thought was narishkeit, to tell you the truth, but it was really, really important. He used to have us memorize how many chapters were in each tractate of a Mishnah. So like Brachot has 10, I have to say, after that I don't remember. But, and Megillah has 4, because that's often what I go and study. I think it's 4. But he would put it into our heads that we had to learn and to memorize these things. And the memorization was how important he would tell us that it was memory. And I think by the time I had him, he was in his later years, that I think by him teaching us that we need to memorize it, he kept his own mind sharp as well. So that was helpful also. The last thing I just want to talk about here is memory is the same, hand in hand, you talk about forgetting. In this week's Torah portion, which we just read this Shabbat, is the beginning of the story of Amalek. Lo al tishkach, that you should not forget what Amalek said. It did to us. The Shabbat in a couple of weeks will be called, before Purim, will be called Shabbat Zachor. And we read about Amalek that we should not forget what they did to us. The mitzvah of memory and not forgetting, the caution against forgetting things, is written 14 times in Deuteronomy. That's how important it is. Thought it was ironic that we have the discussion about not forgetting Amalek in the portion that we just read on Shabbat and Bishalach. So memory continues our legacy. It's the Jewish continuity of passing on memory. And what do we think of the ritual that many of us just did? And you have till Tuesday to do it. Havdalah. And the whole essence of Havdalah is to remember what we did over Shabbat. We remember the beautiful smells that we had of our food. We have the bisamim, not in this order. That we remember that we started Shabbat with lighting candles. We have a candle. We remember that we had Shabbat with the sweetness of wine or grape juice. And so we end Shabbat that way too. And smell, the bisamim part, is such a potent reminder of things. I bet there are people here who have memories of places because of the smell. Where my grandmother used to live, and let me tell you, it was a really long time ago, in Bal Harbor in Florida. The little oasis, the little lobby had such a fragrance to it. And if we ever go somewhere that smells like that, my sister and I are like, smells like Nanny's house. I mean, I haven't been there since the 80s, but just think about it. There's so many smells that remind us of a place. If there's a smell that reminds you of a teaching, use that to review it as well. Maybe it's a way that we can talk to our children and learners, that everyone learns in a different way. Maybe that's the next step in learning, that we can have a different fragrance when we learn something as well. So it was an important lesson for all of us in this Mishnah, that if you don't repeat and review, you might forget, not because of your mind forgetting, but because it just isn't fresh in your mind. It's not a neurologic thing. It's just if you don't review it and don't use it, you lose it. And I think one of the things that this pandemic has showed us, that no matter how old we are, we can learn together. And it's such a beauty to be able to learn together as well. So we do have, I had no idea what time it was, I apologize, but we do have time if people have any comments before we move on to our next part. And I have not read any of the comments. Yeah, they're not for my teaching. Okay. So Audrey.
I want to tell you that last Shabbos was my 20th anniversary of my bat mitzvah, and I read the story of Amalek.
Mazel tov. Very nice.
Thanks for the memory.
Beautiful. Any other comments, remarks?
I think it's important just especially for children, to have to memorize things. My mother used to say that they had to memorize all kinds of things in school. I'm not even talking about in Hebrew school, just to train your brain to memorize things. I can still recite most of the prologue to Canterbury Tales in Middle English from high school.
That's pretty impressive. Yes, my English teacher, Benjamin Weiss, used to make us memorize so many things. And then I had my Chenya Richmond on the other side making us memorize Shirat Hayam, the Song of the Sea, this last weekend's portion. And Deborah's song also, we had to memorize part of that. And I'm glad I still have it memorized and remember it.
That's more practical than remembering part of the prologue to Canterbury Tales in Middle English.
No, not necessarily. It
My
teaches
brother
different
can still do
things.
some of it too.
Different things. Marlene.
Well, I guess practice makes perfect. I came from a family of all musicians, and we had four children and two pianos, the good one upstairs and the less desirable one downstairs. But I can't remember where I read, somebody said that one needs to participate in an activity for 10,000 hours to become an expert, but you can still become pretty darn good at it if you practice something every day. And as an adult student of Hebrew, that was the first thing that my Hebrew teacher told me, is that you may not want to do this and there's nobody else in your class and I'm not going to be checking in on you every day, but if you look at your Hebrew every day, it's amazing what will stick.
Very true. And if for yourself, you do more today than you did yesterday, that's still an improvement and still better. Like any of us who are on Peloton, you learn, you do you. If you can't keep up with the cadence and the resistance, you just do whatever you could do. At least that's what I tell myself. So you just do what you can do and what you can review and learn. And it's not a competition with anyone but yourself. And it doesn't even have to be a competition. So I hope that you all enjoyed. More learning coming tomorrow. And I want to turn to Toby, who's going to be reading our list of names today of those we remember for saying Kaddish.
Today we lovingly recall Evelyn Seelig, Sue Press, Leona Elligberg, Dolores Megan, Phyllis Haas, David Copland, Ivan Stanton, Hilda Stern, Sylvia Kraus, Hope Dellen, Herb Lubars, Hannah Bat Shimon Vakarline, Ellen Babbitt, Theodore Fishman, Michael Barr, Richard Marek, Lillian Tobias, Doris Hildebrandt, Ruth Lewis Bloomfield, Michael Klingbaum, Shirley Shapiro, Carol Hope Taub, David Levy, Tommy Raskin, Phyllis Grusin Weinstein, Robert Maller, Sandy Levine, Office Brian Sicknick, Ed Jotkowitz, Sandy Ironi, Sandra Silberman, Selma Jurell, Yvette Caitlin, Rabbi Malka Kane, Marvin Fish, Oscar Warnick, Alana Finkelstein, Bernice Albert, Toby Case, Harry Polikow, Irene Kosman, Marilyn Cheskis Lear, Madison West, Ernestine Loeb Hamill Erkin, Shelley Bearer, Miriam Clow, Effie Pollock, Arnie Levinson, Marla Goldberg, Barbara Roth Roberts, Rebecca Silverman, Saul Fishman, Davida Shipkowitz, Irv Shapiro, Ike Cohen, Rabbi Dr. Abraham Torsky, Rabbi Stephen Lerner, Annette Korn, and we also remember Ilan Ramon, the astronaut who was killed when the Columbia returned to Earth on February 1st, 2013. May their memories always be a blessing and bring smiles to our faces.
Thank you, Toby. And if anyone has any other names of loved ones who have a yahrzeit today, or you're saying Kaddish, newly buried, please add their names at this time. And please rise and unmute yourself if you'll be reciting Mourner's Kaddish and also if you'll be responding. We'll begin together. Yitzgadal, Yitzgadash, Shemei, Rabba,
Amen.
Bialma, Ibrav, Pirkei, Biamli, Malchutei, Bechayechon, Uviyomechon, Uvachaye, Zechol, Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, Bizman, Ari, B'imru, Amen. Yehi, Rabba, Rav, Be'olam, Maya,
Yes,
Yisbarach, Yishtabach, Yitzhar, Yitzhamam, Yitnaseh, Yithadar, Yitzalem, Yitzlal, Shmei, Kudusha, Hu, Elam, Imko, Birchata, Shirata, Tushbechata, Benechamata, Ta'amiran, Yalma, Imru, Amen. Yehi, Rabba, Shemaya, Hayim, Aleinu, Alko, Yisrael, Imru, Amen. Oseh
Shalom
Shalom, Hu Ya'aseh
Shalom.
Aleinu, Alko, Yisrael, Imru, Amen. May the memories of our loved ones continue to be a blessing in our lives. And turning it over to Debbie.
Thank you, Rabbi. Great teaching today. When Debbie Green said she remembered Canterbury Tales, I was thinking about how I think it was 7th grade or 8th grade, we had to memorize the Jabberwocky, and I still remember most of the lines. Yeah, Toby's going like this. That was the one thing I remember that was painful to remember, to learn and to memorize. I hope everybody is well and healthy and you stay safe in the snow belts. It's going to be difficult, but less difficult because it's a pandemic and we're not going anywhere anyway. I know everyone has gone out to buy their milk and their eggs and their bread. My friend Terry said to me recently that when she lived in Korea, somebody asked her, do Americans make French toast when it's a snowstorm? And she said, why are you asking? And the man said to her, because every time I hear there's a snowstorm in the United States, people go out and buy bread, milk, and eggs. And I just wondered if that's the food that they eat when it's a pandemic, when it's a snowstorm. So I thought that was pretty funny because that's exactly what Americans do. I don't know what Canadians buy, but it's milk and eggs and bread. So it's French toast for all of us.
Same thing.
Same thing. Marilyn says same thing. Yes, Marilyn? Okay.
And
So-
toilet paper.
And toilet, yeah, well, some of us have been hoarding toilet paper since the pandemic began, so.
And
But
all
if you
right.
put a little maple syrup in the French toast, it's really good.
So I do want to welcome Mary again. We're glad to have you with us, Mary. Thanks for being with us today. And everyone, just be safe, take care, and we'll see you tomorrow.
And I'd like to welcome my friend Vivian, who's joining us today.
Oh, Vivian, where are you? You need to unmute and.
There she is, waving.
I didn't know we had somebody else. I knew we had, wait, I don't